chairperson of the University Council, Lona Magara, you have the chairperson appointments board, who is Edwin Karujire. Edwin Karujire happens also to be the son-in-law to the president, in other words, or to the first lady, who is the minister of education, who oversees the university. Now, that is on the more of the political side. So if we went to the technical management of this university, at the top you'll have professor. Okay, that is disputed. The professorship is disputed. So I'll just mention the name Barnabas Nawangwe, whose other documents also say he is called Barnabas Umoja Nawangwe. He is the vice chancellor, substantive. He's holding the position. Immediately after him, you have two positions, both interestingly acting people. So the first one is Buiza Makadasi, who is the deputy vice chancellor academic and is in acting capacity. At the same level with him is Henry Alinaitwe, who is the deputy vice chancellor, finance and administration. Now, that position of finance and administration has been in acting capacity for almost 9 years. The last person that held that position substantively is the current vice chancellor, Professor Barnabas Nawangwe. I should not say professor. So since Barnabas Nawangwe left that position, it has not had someone hold it substantively. Now, the most sad thing about this chart for me is that immediately under the deputy vice chancellor academic, you have again Buiza Makadasi. Now, for those who didn't hear it at first, he holds the upper position, which is the deputy vice chancellor academic, and then he holds the lower position immediately after that, which is the academic registrar. As academic registrar, he is supervised by the deputy vice chancellor academic. In other words, he supervises himself. So it's like Toko holds two positions. In one of those positions, Toko supervises himself in another position. So he reports to himself and takes reports from himself. Now, Dr. Stella Nyanzi, I'll stick with you. Then I move to Jude. Given what you've just said about the university and the nepotism and the management crisis, is this a university at this level that can deliver anything? Is this the abyss? Have we hit the rock bottom?
I mean, I'm going to give you my non-professional opinion because, again, like I said, I'm not a specialist of human resources. I'm a specialist of anthropology, and anthropology really is the study of culture and behavior. In terms of nepotism, I say that when I applied for my position at the School of Law, the vice chancellor at the time, Dumba Sentamu, is my cousin. When I undressed at Makerere University, people were shocked to learn that Professor John Dumba Sentamu is my cousin. And at the time of my protest, he was not just my cousin, but we'd learned after the demise of my father that my father had left him as administrator of his estate. And so we are very close in terms of family and blood ties. Now, if Dumba Sentamu is my cousin, and he's also the administrator of my father's estate, and he's also the vice chancellor of Makerere University, at which I am employed. Does that mean that there was nepotism in my appointment? That's an important question in terms of family and kin belonging to the same space of engagement, of work, the same workplace. Right now, so in terms of familial or marital relationship, therefore, I want to be as objective, if objectivity is an issue here, as possible, to say that it is in fact possible to find siblings or family members or marital relatives employed in the same space. Now, in terms of appointments, recruitment, training, promotion, what we do, those of us who are educated, those of us who have been empowered with training, those of us who believe in principles of impartiality, what we do is declare conflict of interest during our applications for jobs. And ordinarily, family members must be excused or not allowed to participate in our selection in our interviews, in monitoring our probationary period, in reviewing materials we submit for promotion, in our disciplinary, if there's disciplinary decisions taken upon us, if there's demotion too, because some of the other questions are around when marital couples separate and one has been the boss of the other. There could be issues around conflict of interest if my ex-husband had to sit in authority and make decisions about my demotion or promotion. So conflict of interest is important to declare. And therefore, I think for me, in terms of the politicization of the relationships of people at the helm or leadership of institutions in Uganda, with a case study of Makerere University, one must ask important questions. How was Lorna appointed? But before we go to Lorna, how was Janet appointed? How did Janet earn the what technical skills, what expertise, what training, what wisdom did she bring to the table to be appointed against her competitors? Who were her competition? How transparent was the application, the competition for the position? Karujira, the names you mentioned, these people who have marital relationships to the first family, how were they appointed? What are their credentials? Who trained them? Where did they study? Are they all S2 dropouts who have master's qualifications? Because we do know that an S2 dropout sits at the helm of the Ministry of Education in our country. If it can happen at that level, the political wing, what about the technical wing? Who are the technical people? You know, in my case, Bruce Kabasa was sitting on the human resources position. In my case, the professor Buyiza that you mentioned was heading a committee that used to review the applications for promotion. We'd submit all our publications for review, and he'd go through certifying them and making sure that they were credible, and they would weigh them, they would throw some things out. And so I'm surprised that Barnabas and his qualifications were put on a weighing scale. Even I am much better than he is. Of course, I'm not pro NRM. I'm not an NRM cadre. So maybe if that is a prerequisite for becoming vice chancellor, I will not become vice chancellor. But even my publications at the time of undressing at Makerere University, they were much. They weigh so much more than what Barnabas has today. Barnabas has conference citations, a number of conference proceedings. Thanks, Agora, for revealing this, right? And I want to say as well, I mean, Jude can really clarify on this, but in terms of weighing the quality of our publications, many times it's also very disciplinary. I know, for example, that in the social sciences, in anthropology particularly, what's of weight is a monograph, right? What's of weight is a book where one is a single author that's been published by an academic press, a university press or a scholarly press. Right, and it's not really the journal article. I know that in other disciplines it's the journal article. I know as well in other disciplines that it's patented works. So I don't know what architects need. And so before we criticize, yes, I am very critical of Barnabas and other high-flying appointees at Makerere University, but we must also take time to analyze in terms of architecture, in terms of medicine, in terms of the arts, fine art. What are the credentials that the discipline weighs? Because Makerere University's human resource policy is also one thing where they judge the credentials for a lawyer vis-a-vis those of an engineer, vis-a-vis those of a music MDD professor, vis-a-vis those of a, I don't know if you have, like aerospace physicists at Makerere, but the disciplines have got different standards, which rely a lot on the disciplinary merits for promotion, right? So in terms of nepotism, just to go back to round back, my point is, you say to me, is Makerere a university? These are important questions, Godwin, because let's not water down the conversation among scholars to that on the streets. right? Nepotism is real in Uganda, but we must, I think mine is an invitation that we take the conversation a bit higher. It's deeply nuanced, right? But I'm very critical of the marital relations to the first family who are holding spaces of power. And I'm very, very critical of what's happening in terms of waiting and the transparency that goes into these processes. There's no transparency at all. It's very vague, it's opaque. And many times, the other thing that I think should be mentioned is that these appointments are done after qualified, experienced, well skilled caliber of staff are thrown out either by the barrel of the hand or through intimidation, or after they outshone the system, or after they rebelled and questioned. And so Jude's question about, I don't know why I was given an introduction letter, could be that Jude was making noise that he's not supposed to be making, and he was given a warning about the sort of political questions he was raising, and then they threw him out uh, because he was raising the wrong questions in the wrong season, and then he would be replaced by an idiot who has a marital relationship with the first family. And the pity is that a lot of Makerere thinkers will keep quiet and life will go on as if nothing is wrong. And the rot continues to fester at the university. Thank you very much, Godwin.
Yeah, we also learned this week that there is this threat to staff, academic staff, that if they are critical of government, of the regime, I should say, and not just on of their own. So if they're invited to private media or any media house and they're critical of the regime, they're normally threatened with threats of not getting they're called post-retirement contracts, and those who get those post-retirement contracts. So I mean, people are gagged. It's more like soft censorship into pleasing the powers that be, so that when they are done, they somehow get that post-retirement contract. But those who get them, it is further then used to push them even to the brink. And someone was saying that's the reason now you watch Ugandan TV and you don't get the academics talking about say what's happening in Goma, because you don't know who you may annoy if you said certain things, or talking about what's happening around the world. They are pushed into soft censorship to the point that they just keep quiet. See no evil, hear no evil, say no evil. That kind of life. Now, Jude, I'm back to you. So, do you want to weigh in on what Doctor said concerning the issue of the management and how it is set up, or I just go straight to another question for you?
No, I would like to say something about that. First of all,
Perfect. Go ahead.
I'd like to thank Dr. Stella for her incisive comment. I would like to agree with her on the issue of disciplinary traditions being peculiar, with anthropologists preferring a monograph because of really what anthropology is really about and the way it works, that if someone is putting up an expert piece of writing, they need a lot more space than maybe somebody communicating something quickly on a trace of COVID that needs to be communicated to others in that community, and then people react immediately. So it is true that there can be those disciplinary specializations, and it is understood, and the human resource manual could reflect some of those peculiarities. However, the additional detail is that Makerere has a promotions policy, and it specifies what it accepts and what it doesn't. It even creates some of those peculiarities, but it does so for fine art and performing arts. Even if the policy can and should be improved upon, it has to be respected as it is. Its implementation does not focus on how it should be. The implementation focuses on how it is at this time. So that is important. It specifies what counts as an acceptable publication and what doesn't. So I think that is an important clarification in reply to Dr. Stella's submission on the issue of publications. Regardless, there are some core standards when we talk about publication. For example, academic publishing, by its very, from the point of defining it as communication within a discourse community, peer review is a cardinal tenet. The work must be peer reviewed. And we know where work is peer reviewed, preferably blind double peer review. Why peer review? Because this is a discourse community, and what you're talking about must be acceptable to the community within which you're communicating. Anything that does not look like it has been peer reviewed becomes unacceptable. And the human resource manual clarifies as much. As well, an internationally recognized publisher is talked about because a good publisher will ensure that minimum standards for acceptability of the publication have been met. So the manual, the promotion policy is there, despite that it could be improved upon. It is a very important element of lawfulness that laws, policies are adhered to as they are, perhaps as efforts are made to improve on them. I would like to comment on the issue that you talked at length about, describing the possibility of nepotism. My substantive input on that is that actually similarity is not sameness. Indeed, there is a difference between association and relationship. These things are a lot more nuanced than they may appear at first sight. Is it implied, for example, that the Minister of Education instructed my wrongful interdiction because she happens to be the First Lady? I don't think so. A university, from a perspective of studying it as an organization that is unique in nature, has been defined as organized anarchy. There is contestation all the time, but the standard is that we debate our contestation in a rules-based engagement. When the university has policies, those policies must be observed and seen to be observed. I don't care really that somebody is somebody's in-law. Perhaps the appointing authority is vested with the powers to do so. In fact, it may sound exciting that these people are in these positions, and prima facie, it can raise questions. But the question, who is responsible for the publications of a person who may have been promoted as early as 2013? Was it the current Minister of Education? Are people unable to find these publications because somebody is a friend to the first family? I think people sometimes will hide behind what is rhetorical. They may hide behind what is, it's called scapegoating, Toko. That council includes these people, but council is made up of 24 people, of which 12 are either staff or students. The question then is, if we have a human resources manual, it says somebody can only be in an acting position for 6 months, and that can be renewed once to make 12 months. Anything they may do beyond that time is null and void. Of education, and particularly her being the wife of the president that is responsible for this person continuing in that position, I think we can engage beyond the excitement of these people appearing to be related to some people. A system does exist, but a system can also be abused. You asked an important question. Have we reached rock bottom? I would say no. because we have systems in place, we have policies. Indeed, to my recollection, Dr. Stella had her day in the staff tribunal and it ruled in her favor. The question that is important for me is one of why, after she has got that decision in her favor, those in places in administration try to change the rules of the game. Because at that stage, I do recall reading in the press that an application was made to stay execution of the ruling of the tribunal to clarify it, and the tribunal clarified Dr. Stella Nyanzi's ruling in her favor, but still the ruling was not implemented, and she proceeded to the High Court, which also gave her consideration. That these organs do exist to report grievances when they come up, for me, is the best evidence that the university has not really reached rock bottom. However, that we have all these challenges, for me, points to the fact that these systems that are well established and they are good should be supported to not be derailed by incumbents that are abusive in their personal capacities and then giving the impression of this being bigger, entrenched in a system of nepotism and misgovernance, when in fact it may not be exactly the case. One person sits down and writes an interdiction letter, and then an impression is given that they do this in the name of the president's son-in-law. Did they do it in that person's name? Was that person even aware? And what happens to all the other people in the council when such a thing is done? We talk about a person being in a position acting for over 3 years, when we ourselves have a policy that we made ourselves past it and we cannot respect that policy. Is that because the president has told people to do that? That should be the question to ask, in my view. Thank you.
Okay. So holding it with you, Professor. You mentioned
Yes.
that the university has systems, but it's possible to have systems, and it's not just about having them. You know, the thing they say about justice, it must not just be done, but must be seen to be done. So the university seems to have these systems, but there are people who have served, for instance, on the university council since 2001. 2001, I had just left top class. I was in P1, and that gentleman has been on that university council for that long to this day. Now, the maximum number of years that one should serve on that council, is it I'll just have to check, but I think it's about 8 years at most. Now, that is evidence probably of systems not working. You have all these people appointed in acting capacity, where the maximum amount of time they can spend in that capacity says probably 6 months, 12 months, and someone has been in acting capacity for 4 years. It seems the university does have systems on paper, the same way Uganda probably, or the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea have the word democracy, but on paper, and the reality is different.
That's what I talked about. And I suggest that some of these questions really should be put to the right people, not to infer nepotism on them, because that gives those abusing the systems an easy way out. When we blame nepotism, where nepotism is not even the problem. For example, you have this policy, it says somebody is entitled to get a post-retirement contract on certain conditions. They meet the conditions and the contract is not given. The person refusing to give the contract should tell us why they are not giving the contract. We shouldn't just say this happened because so and so comes from the other family. I like to work with hard evidence. These people should be asked and they should respond. And when they don't, their supervisors should respond. And that should be the case irrespective of who is involved. Talking about the issue of council, we had the visitation committee led by Dr. Abe Renderi, rest in peace. It observed that there is a loophole in the law which allows people to be members of council irrespective of their credentials in terms of qualification. All they are required to have is the selection of the constituency that they represent. A recommendation was made to pay attention to the credentials of members of council. That report is available online. Our listeners should look it up and read that section on council. They also recommended that a system should be written into the law, the Universities and Other Tertiary Institutions Act, that a person serves on council for 4 years, renewable once. What we currently have, unfortunately, it is the law. Someone can represent a constituency wherever they are appointed for 2 consecutive terms. So you have somebody representing convocation. After the 4 years, they get a renewal, another 4 years. Then they start representing government, perhaps for 8 years. And after those ones, they go to represent the general public. A recommendation was made to that. The question should now be put to the leadership of the university what they have done in the direction of implementing that recommendation. As of now, that is how the law is. People are still able to do that. Maybe the university or its council should initiate a process of amending that part of the Universities and Other Tertiary Institutions Act. Maybe. The question that comes is, why was money spent on this commission, the visitation committee, and it comes up with this recommendation touching on the topmost organ of the university, which is the University Council, and nothing appears to be done in the direction of implementing that recommendation. That question, as I said earlier, should go to certain people, not to me. Although at the same time, I am reluctant to infer that all such questions, now like that one, boil down to a person simply being the relative of another person. We can be more evidence-based on some of these things. And so that we disaggregate the negligence or the abuse of individuals from the rhetoric, from the what is easy to talk about, so that we don't go into scapegoating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, I will say that we invited the university to have someone who would respond to such queries. And after initially giving us what seemed like the orange light or the amber, they eventually turned out not to come at all. So we are here without them. And we will have the discussion without them, unfortunately, because the discussion anyway must happen. So now I'll turn to Dr. Stella, Dr. Nyaz. Doctor, I want us now to talk about the issue of corruption at the university at Makerere. We've listened into an audio where there's a member of management at Makerere soliciting desperately, it seemed, for a bribe of 5 million to get people promotions, and said, if you don't need even the papers in the first place, as long as you give me that 5 million, I will elevate you to the levels you want. You worked at this university for a long time. Do you have any experience of anything? Did you hear anything? Did you see anything that was questionable in the direction of corruption, at least from the management? Dr. Nyanzi?
Right. Yes, I'm here. You talked about money. I could talk about sex. Um, as a woman, academic, as a younger woman in the academic uh, rank and file at Makerere University, I know that a number of young women my age, because when I finished my PhD and joined, the rank and file at Makerere University, tenured rank and file. A lot of us who are early postdocs were very ambitious and thought that we would enter and then work our way up. So do the research, do the teaching, get the publications, get the research grants, supervise the students if one was a teacher or lecturer, and then apply for promotion. Incidentally, I know cases of faculty who either got promoted after exchanging sexual services
with individuals at the university, or those who were denied promotion.
their promotion never traveled because they refused to exchange their sexual services, their sexual bodies with those who made the decisions. Because so part of promotion in an academic environment, unlike other spaces such as industry or commerce or military, promotion is not a one-stop event. So one has to work for the credentials, get the papers, get the student stout, get the conferences, get whatever it is. And I have shared a copy of the human resource policy as it was in 2016-17 when I was having my own disputes. Maybe there's a new version. In 2016-2017, I was among the people who criticized it for being archaic and outdated and it needed revising to bring it in tandem with one, human rights, but two, current practice in terms of labor rights. But at the time, and I'm getting my records from Facebook because I used to share my evidence quite abundantly with my followers on Facebook at the time. But one of the things I highlight is that promotion is not a one-time event in the academy. After one has made up sufficient evidence for the need to be promoted, then a process begins where, after submission to that, there's a board which Professor Buyinza used to head in my time. Maybe Jude knows what it's called, but they would then review the qualifications based on criteria in the human resource policy that I have shared. And in my case, for example, because you asked about money, in my case, because the dispute had gone on for 5 years from 2015 until about 2016. I applied for my promotion in 2013-14, and it didn't go on until I undressed and the academic staff tribunal ordered the appointments board, as Jude rightfully narrated, to promote me, reinstate me at work, which they failed to do. I had 2 appeals that I won, and each time the academic appointments board said, reinstate Nyanzi in her position, promote her, give her her money that you've been cutting because I was getting half pay, and also give her back her research grants that you're withholding. So to answer your question about corruption, at the time of assessing one's credentials based on the criteria that Jude highlighted, like peer review, blind peer review, internationally recognized publishing houses, etc. There should be a process, and there is a mechanism at Makerere. Now, in my case, at the time, it was still functional because Professor Buyinza approved. After about 6 months, it should be shorter, but after about 6 months, he said to me, actually, you meet the credentials, but there's no way I'm writing your letter of approval. And my files that I'd submitted, a thick wad of publications, sat waiting for one singular stamp to say that I met the credentials. But as I've also shared, Godwin, the human resource policy, the human resource manual, which specifies, for example, that at the level of research fellow, okay, so just to backtrack very quickly, the Makerere University Human Resource Manual recognizes 3 types of academic staff: teaching staff, whose promotion track is very specific, research staff who have a different promotion track, and library staff. That's the three different specifications, the three different promotion routes one can go through at Makerere University to be promoted. And what I've shared is for research staff under which track I fell in at the time I was an employee of the university. And I just want to say on the second page where one is promoted from research fellow to senior research fellow, one should have been in service for at least 5 years or have a 5-year renewable contract. They must have 3 papers. In my case, in 2016, when I undressed, I had 15. So they want 3 years of proven research. I had 15 years of proven research experience. A minimum of 3 refereed publications. I had 30 refereed publications. At least 2 research reports. I had 10. Okay. And so I had all the criteria. If they wanted new publications, I was publishing. If they wanted, there's nothing about teaching, there's nothing about administration, there's nothing about sitting on Mamdani's PhD training program. The criteria for promotion, the criteria for how one gets promoted from a research fellow to a senior research fellow are there. And it was always clear whenever I appeared anywhere that there was no logical, there was no commonsensical reason to deny my promotion. And so, because nobody knew that I was related to the vice chancellor at the time, there were suggestions of money. Maybe you haven't paid money. Maybe you're not pressing the right buttons. Maybe you don't have access to power. Maybe this and maybe that, and maybe this and maybe that. And then there was the question of tribe. Maybe you're the wrong tribe. Then there was the question of religion. Choose College of Humanities and Social Sciences. There was a strong Baganda Roman Catholic component, and the sectarianism at Makerere Institute of Social Research at Makerere University, the sectarianism around tribe and religion and political party affiliation are sickening. So away from the money, I don't know how the money works because I don't pay bribes. I'm not corruptible. I don't do that shit. I've heard about it. I don't know how it works. I've heard about sex, which I know how that works, right? I've also heard about sectarianism because people say to me, you have the qualifications. Stella Nyazi, you meet the qualifications. How come your application for promotion has been suffocated, truncated? How come they've sat on it for years? And they say to me, well, maybe you're not giving someone sex. Maybe. And I said, but how like why would I give anybody sex to get promoted? I didn't get appointed based on sex, right? And then they say to me, maybe you're the wrong ethnic group, huh? And I said, but I'm a Muganda, and in truth, you know, it mattered that one was a Muganda, but I was the wrong tribe. I was not Roman Catholic. I was not connected to the Roman Catholics. I was not connected to the Muslims either because we had a strong Muslim presence as well. And I was a nobody.
Okay.
Right? So I haven't answered the entirety of your question because I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea that the intelligentsia of a nation, of a country, of a republic, of an independent post-colonial state cannot be permitted. Like the only space where we should be able to think freely, to get a promotion based on merit, should be the university. But Toko, sadly, even that has been taken away from us. You must be the right ethnic group or the right religion. If you're not a born-again Pentecostal of Munyankore affiliation, with NRM leanings. You know, the Sarah Salih's name has come up. If you're not that sort of NRM rubber post, NRM sexually available counterpart, forget about promotion. If one is not heavily loaded, then the other thing about criticism, that's the last point I make here, because I think that when you asked Jude, he was careful. I can talk about criticism quite happily, because in terms of denying me promotion and then suspending me and then threatening and intimidating me, I think the question you asked Jude directly was about those who are critical are being intimidated, and those who are critical are also being denied, what did you call them, post-retirement, I think you call them post-retirement something. Post-retirement, I can't see the word I wrote. Contracts, post-retirement contracts. And I wanted to say that in my case, I was critical, and I will circulate letters where the appointments board at Makerere University, having denied to address my promotion for years, then turn around and say, Nyanzi, because on your social media platforms, particularly Facebook, you are criticizing Janet Museveni. We are warning you. I got warning letters. Oh my God, like these warning letters were flowing. And in my time, they were not signed by Professor Nawanga. They were signed by a man called Bruce Kabasa, who was heading the appointments board. And I would get these letters. Sometimes they would even just come out in the press. So totally unprofessional. I am trained in literature, and poetry was my specialization in my 311 for my Bachelor of Arts degree. I'm a poet. Makerere University, using government money, took me to literature class and taught me how to criticize power using poetry. And they didn't stop me. I was taught by Professor Mary Okururu, Karora Okurut, who is NRM, but she taught us the beauty of using poetry. I was practicing my discipline when I was on social media criticizing oppressive power, including Janet Museveni. I was doing my work for which I am trained and skilled as a poet. So when they threaten me and say, Nyanzi, shut up on social media, don't speak on social media because you're criticizing Janet Museveni, because you criticized Janet Museveni, we are going to fire you, and we are now terminating you, and we are now transferring you from Miser to Uripec. All of that is totally unprofessional. So I want to just land by going to the point that Jude raises around how universities are enterprises of anarchy and why we should have contestation. Yes, but how does one contest unfairly? If my voice and my ability to contest are taken away from me, and when I try to exercise them, I am penalized, I am threatened, I am thrown out. In your case, you get an interdiction letter. How then do we contest? How do we debate? What happens to debate if a mere Facebook challenge of abusive power that's exercised even at Makerere is taken away? That's not a level playing ground. So to answer your question, Godwin, about why is it that we just have a historian who is one singular historian who's not even a PhD, he's not a doctor of history, always regurgitating the same points on NBS, and not very many other lecturers having input? It's because people are terrified to engage in meaningful ways. Lawyers who want to criticize the regime based on their disciplinary training and knowledge and background cannot do so, because they will receive similar letters of warning and intimidation, and then demotion and transfer, irregular transfer, criminal transfer from one unit of the university to another, simply because they're practicing the skill and training to criticize. Universities are created, especially for those of us in the humanities and social sciences, to critique and criticize and debate. That is what we are created to do, to think and push the limits of thought and then create new possibilities. But how do we do that if the very
Okay.
artists and social scientists are blocked and punished? So your question was sort of a non-question. Olimu answer mwozanyira toko. Tozanyira mwasa. Olimu answer mwozanyira.
Okay, take it. So let me now turn to Professor Sempewa. Professor, you've had the hassles that Dr. Stella Nyanzi says she went through to get the promotion that she rightly deserved, and stuff like that. But Also, what the exhibition has proved beyond reasonable doubt is that the people with seriously questionable academic papers at the helm of the university, and we've not only proved that, even the courts have, the people have been taken out because, including Mwasa, someone went to court, and in this case, some other cases was Mwasa. So how is it that the university has so many qualified people who meet, even over meet the requirements, academically speaking, and yet it seems to also be having the wrong people without the qualifications getting these positions instead. How does that, how is that mismatch coming about?
Well, thank you, Toko. I'd like to start with reaching out to one of the people commenting in the messages, asking about who should the questions go to. I indicated in my introduction that I am an academic, I'm not a politician, I am not a pundit, so I am very evidence-based. When we talk about, for example, the composition of council and the recommendation of the Rendere committee, when I say the question should be put to the right person, I think I mean that the chairperson of council should be asked the progress they have made in the direction of implementing the recommendations of the Rendere report concerning council. When I talk about my interdiction, I talked about an allegation about my teaching coming up. And when I say the question should be put to a particular person, I mean the person who signed the interdiction would be the best person to tell us who complained about me, with what evidence, at what level, when, what steps were taken, how the standing orders were followed, how the policies were followed, which committee was involved, where the minutes of the committee. So these are the people I'm talking about. I'm not being evasive at any rate. I will now proceed to the question you asked Dr. Stella about corruption. It is one on which I think the evidence makes talking comfortable. We have all heard the audio in which people are talking about 5 million. And as Toko said, emphatically, unrelentingly, audaciously, and I think perhaps disparately. That is something you can look at. I invite members to interest themselves in reading the report of the ad hoc committee of the appointments board into the matters of MISA. In there, a citation is misrepresented from the human resource manual to give the impression that all academic staff are teaching staff, when in fact it was saying that research staff are also academic staff. That is independently verifiable. And a question about it could go to the people who signed as authors of that report. Yes, I have heard the people tell others that they will never get promoted as long as they are the ones in charge. I think that is another reference to abuse. Others have said some people will never get into certain positions as long as they are still around. You can make your own inference as to whether there is corruption or there isn't. But the beauty of all this discourse is that we have policies inked, people who are literate. Here people can read, they understand, and then they know their credentials. Normally, they are public. If a person, for example, has published, their publications are available in public domain. And then we look at the practice. There are glaring cases in which people have tendered publications and they were rejected for being predatory, and then other people submitted publications from the same publishers and they were accepted, then they were no longer predatory. Now, that is what you look at and say, what is good for the goose ought to be good for the gander. And that is where the contestations come in. As to whether there is corruption, everybody can make their own conclusion until you get into the inconvenience of someone bearing a qualification whose credentials are in policies that are available in the public domain, and then it is not possible to find those credentials matching. You have a policy on something, the process is well known, but then the practice looks discrepant. That is where the issue comes in now. For example, a famous example is the one of Dr. Stella Nyanzi. She applied to be promoted to the rank of senior research fellow. And then what was a straight line becomes a circle. And you wonder, when did a research fellow to become senior research fellow require participation in teaching activities? In such contestation, and which I don't mind, by the way, because that is what universities are made of, the gold standard is the yardstick given to us by the policy. So you look at section 6 of the promotion policy, talks about research staff. Teaching is not one of the requirements. But then you have a person in the position of power insisting unrelentingly that someone must teach before they can be promoted. That becomes the issue of abuse. And that is where you start agreeing that, by the way, there may also be corruption. Because when you hear an audio emphasizing that the important thing is for someone to pay 5 million, you start wondering whether there is no link between the people overstaying in the positions of acting in a blatant contravention of the policies that are well published and the payment of such monies. It is called inference. It suggests it, but more work can be done to prove. It is not only Dr. Stella. I applied for promotion, I think over 7 years ago now, but somebody just created new words which don't exist in the policy, and decisions were made along that. I am safe to comment about this, whatever threat may hang on the horizon. Safe because the staff tribunal made that determination that before joining Makerere, I had taught at other universities and we were tendering teaching experience. The policy is unequivocal. It actually uses the word actual before teaching experience. And section 14 of the policy describes what qualifies to be teaching experience. The things they talk about as constituting actual teaching experience in that policy are the things that are done at the universities where I had taught. But somebody stood their ground, abusing their position of power, and they said, you must gain the experience here or you don't get promoted. Thank goodness, though, we have organs that can supervise such a person. What worries me is when such a violation is allowed to take so long and even reach the tribunal, when the appointments board could have arrested it, when the college committee could have arrested it, when management could have arrested it, and it is not. It is the same thing in the case of Dr. Stella, where someone abuses their position of power to impose, to purport to create policies when they are not members of council. That is where the abuse comes from. And have afforded us, and for which I am very grateful, it reaches a level where people have the audacity to actually solicit these things. No fear of penalty whatsoever. I am happy to hear that when my chairpersons of the staff associations petitioned the chairperson of council to take the matter of this solicitation of a bribe seriously, something has been done about it. I think a statement came out today indicating that the member of council involved has been interdicted. That was the request of the staff associations. I will end with commenting on the issue
Okay.
of being
Yes, sir.
critical. For me, I would say I am not critical at all. I am not critical. These things I talk about are commonsensical issues that if a person is soliciting a bribe, council has to do something about this. This one was a representative of one of the staff associations, and the staff associations came out and said something has to be done about this. If somebody is in an acting position in excess of what the policy says, then to say that this person should get out that position, I don't see that as being critical at all. This is simply saying we gave these standards to ourselves and we cannot be seen to be the ones violating them. Thank you.
Jude, just hold on there. The issue of litigation. The East African newspaper ran a story in 2019 that they updated later in 2020 that says the university, Makerere claims it wants to be a research-led university, was actually spending more money on litigation. So for those who don't know that, litigation means court cases. The money they were spending, hiring lawyers, paying them, and things like that. So it was spending more money on litigation than it was spending on research. So it seems like the university just can't get out of courts lately, and it is there with either staff today, students tomorrow, all the time. How much is this affecting the running of the university as you look at it from the angle of someone who belongs to Moasa?
I wish the money that is spent on court cases went to research, but I am not in charge of finance. I am not in the legal office. But I think if we did our administration in ways that are more law abiding, that are more humanistic, that we had ADR, for example, if people who make these violations were not protected as to the level of getting to impunity, I think those cases would be avoidable.
Okay, thank you. So it's at this point that we are going to now bring in members of the audience. I'll ask members of the audience that if you get the microphone, and I'm going to give a couple of you the microphone, you ask one question or make one comment. Don't ask if we can hear you. If we can't hear you, we'll tell you. But if I mention your name and you have the microphone, please just go straight to the point, make your comment, ask your question. If it is to a particular panelist, do it. And we'll really appreciate if you can do that under a minute. So I'm going to start that right now. I'm giving people the microphone. Yes. So let's start with Isaac. Isaac, you have the microphone, and if you're speaking, your microphone is muted. So you'll have to unmute it to speak so we can hear you. But if you got the microphone by accident, just keep quiet, and then that means I'll take it away from you and give it to someone else. Okay, so let's hear from Paul. Paul Mijaje, you have the microphone. Do you want to speak? Mel Melvin, is everything okay on your side? Lowell?
Me, I want to ask a quick question to the professor. You said he's an expert in publishing. Now, there has been an indictment on the credentials of the vice chancellor and how he was promoted from associate professor to full professor. I would like to get his take on that and what that would mean for the image of the university, given that you have a person at the helm of it that whose credentials are questioned. What are the implications of that on the university, its standing within the global academic society? Thank you.
Thank you, Lawel. Professor is going to respond to that right away as I call upon other people to ask for the microphone. So over to you, Professor Sempewa.
Kindly, can I hear that question again?
So he says that you said you're an expert on publications, and there is a
Yes.
question about the vice chancellor Barnabas Nawangwe's publications. They seem not to be adding up. There's a required number, as I understand it, of publications in terms of books, in terms of journals that one must have to attain the level of full professorship, and he seems not to have that. So he says, what is the implication of that on the university and its reputation?
Thank you for the question. Issues of publishing are very close to the heart of academic integrity, and academic integrity is at the center of universities and the way they are perceived. Even at top-rated universities, issues of integrity, ethics, and quality in publications are key. I believe that the Vice Chancellor has the required publications. We just hope that the University Council will point people to those publications to take away that question, because it is a nagging question, it's an inconveniencing question. But I trust the systems of the university. He could not have been elevated to all these positions without those publications until even that one is actually proved. We hear the allegations, they are disturbing allegations, and indeed that is what led the associations to write to the chairperson of the University Council, asking that council, which is the appointing authority, clears the air on that matter to remove that cloud, the risk to the perception of the university's systems, or the way the university is perceived, to keep it out of that space of doubt. And Toko, what I'm talking about, all these professors, especially those in leadership, they are under even closer scrutiny by their institutions and the general public, the general academic community. Their peer-reviewed publications are in public domain. So I hope they will be put out quickly, and then we move on to other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the challenge is over to the professor. Oh, the challenge is over to Nawangwe, whether he is or isn't a professor. Stella Nyanzi, you want to step in to this directly?
I want to give a counterpoint to Jude's response, because although he says, or he claims to be with expertise in assessing publications or publishing, I think he said publishing. My counterpoint is that within academia, as academics, our productions are not secret affairs. We publish for the academy, right? So if Nawangwe indeed meets the credentials that are required to be professor, so professor is not it's not an honorary appointment. It's not if it's within the academic track of promotion. Like I shared the research track that applied to me in 2016 2017, according to the human resource policy of where he attained his professorship or his associate professorship, there are criteria that are specified. And just as I always boast about my publications, because I don't even have to be there to speak about what I have published. For us academic scholars, people within the tenure track, that is how we attain promotion. Nobody has to. I don't have to promote my own self. Your work promotes you. It should be accessible to faculty and students and peers and critics who don't believe in your line of thought or discipline or argument, and also to the world. A professor is not a professor if he has to pull out his hidden intestine to show us, this is my colon. No, 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 no. And so I think my response to Lowell would have been, find out what is his professorship in. If he's a professor of architecture, what are the credentials at Makerere University? In fact, I hear he didn't attain professorship at Makerere. I don't think that's where he did. But what are architects required to become associate professor and then professor? Did he meet those qualifications? If he's an architect, was it that he's supposed to submit design? I don't know what it is if he went to a university in Russia. But one, what we cannot know, the others who have done architecture would know, for example. So I've worked a lot within public health, and I know, for example, that virologists or statisticians within the field of research, the sort of credentials they produce are not similar to what I produce, but I can go to statistics best library bibliographies and find what any statistician in Uganda claims to have produced and published, right? Likewise for Nawangwe. The question cannot be a question that is free floating forever. I think, in my view, that the assertion by Professor say, I don't want to call you Professor Sempewa. If you say that, he said he could not have been elevated without proof. Oh my God, I just gave proof that I met all the criteria. I was overqualified for my promotion and I was denied promotion. What guarantee is there that Barnabas actually could have been promoted without any criteria? You just have to be a cadre. Just be a cadre. Promise to do what Museveni wants, and you will get the promotion, right? And so for me,
Yeah.
I think the very last point I think is, if there are people who meet the credentials, the criteria for promotion through publication, and we are overqualified and we were denied promotion, why would anyone, in terms of logic and rationale, why would anyone think that it's impossible at the same university for a man without requisite qualifications to get promotion, especially given that
Okay.
he's abiding by the will of the power holders? It's through abuse of
Okay.
power
So,
and office that he was promoted.
Stella, let me just sum it up by going to Jude and saying, Jude, there are other professors at Makerere. You a professor, an associate. If one wants to find your publications, is there a place where you would refer them to find them, and where you would expect that for every professor at Makerere, their publications ought to be there? Is there such a place?
Toko, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Stella. From the point of definition, to publish or a publication means to make publicly and widely available. It is not only academic papers that are published, even music is published. So that there's no doubt about that. The publications, my publications you're asking about, you can find them any time of day on the internet, in any library, in any database. I understand that because it is in the nature of publications being publications that they are required to be publicly available. If they were secret, they wouldn't be publications. But the conversation, the person who asked the question touched on the credibility of the university. And now that takes you to a slightly deeper level. If you are unable to find them on your own, we go into issues which you now talk about on the balance of probabilities compared to beyond reasonable doubt. If we are advocating for good governance, then indeed my position would be that this person, in view of the gravity of the risk to the reputation of the institution, deserves the benefit of the doubt. The systems can be given the opportunity. We say, okay, we don't see them. People are looking for them and are unable to see them, but you are the one who promoted. Kindly, can you clear the air? I don't find that position radical at all, because they may well do. Some people publish in languages to which we are not all that very exposed. Maybe their work is
Okay.
indexed in databases that we don't consult every day. So it is a meeting midway that we say, okay, there is this issue, but we are giving you the opportunity, or we are inviting you to please clear the air on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. We'll definitely probably come back to that. I shouldn't have said definitely. Let me get two other questions now, Ziwa. Ziwa, if you're speaking to yourself, your microphone is muted. So you just have to unmute it and then ask your question. Okay, Agatha, do you have something to say? Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
There could be. There's a risk that I'm speaking to myself. Thanks. Now that I can be heard. Ziwa, you asked for the microphone and you have it. If you want to speak, now is the time to unmute and make your comment or question in a minute. Okay, there's someone called the free dude. Do you want to speak now?
Yeah. Thank you, Toko. I have two very quick ones. One is to Professor Sempebwa. I just want him to come in to weigh in on how he thinks that WASHIA is responsible for the current University Council challenges beyond the management gaps that he's
What did you say?
raised.
WASHIA?
WASHIA, the Universities and Other Institutions and Other Tertiary Institutions Act.
Okay.
Yeah, how does he think it is responsible for the current challenges? Do we want to think about amendments, especially as he discusses the issues at the council level on representation? And then two, to Stella Nyanzi. She seems to allege a lot of things about people demanding for sex for her for promotion. I think when we are in such space, we also need to be quite explicit. Is she able to point to some spaces where this sex has been demanded? It is very good for institutional reviews and actual handling where these gaps have happened. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, I was speaking to myself, unfortunately. The same thing I was telling people not to do. So now we go back to the panelists. I'll start with Stella Nyanzi. Do you want to say something about what he said before I go to Jude?
I mean, the free dude. I think one of the things you said that's mistaken is you said I made claims that people asked me for sex, not me. No one would dare ask me for sex. I said that when the preliminary years I was at Makerere University as a research fellow and struggling with my promotion dispute, that I interacted with many others at my level of postdoc, so people in our early 30s to about 40. And yeah, there is evidence that especially women who had requisite qualifications were denied promotion when they did not offer sexual services. I can give names, but I'm not privy to, I don't have the permission to share names of individuals. What I want to say, away from my own anecdotal evidence, is that people have published, so the sexual harassment policy at Makerere University, which is a very good policy, caters for students and staff. And part of the research that informed that policy was based on the reports, interviews conducted with particularly female younger staff who actually said that their promotion was being sexualized. in addition, there have been publications. I mean, you just have to do so. So the good thing as well about scholarship and the environment in which I'm speaking today is do a Google search for yourself, free dude. Don't be lazy. One of the things that we do is to verify for ourselves. I have made an assertion. If you don't believe me, this is not my other, persona where I am a feminist making noise. Go and do research. Sylvia Tamale published a paper, Bitches at the Academy, I think, or Bitches at the University. And do a Google search on Google Scholar. So again, to respond to your question, Toko, that you asked Jude, one of the easiest ways to weigh anybody who postures around as an academic scholar is to go to Google Scholar, put in their names. Whatever they have written or published will come up in whatever language or discipline. You can say Russian, Italian. What has Stella Nyanzi published in Luganda? It will come up for the record. And so look up sexual violence, sexual harassment, sex at the workplace at Makerere University for yourself. And then you can come and say, oh, Stella, either my own research has, or your own research has proved my allegations or not. That is what we do within the academy. It's not up to me to defend my hypothesis. I'm saying there is sex for promotion, not just for students from one year to another, but also for junior academic female staff. Deal with it,
Okay.
do the research, don't just dismiss it because it's coming from the loud mouth of Stella Nyanzi.
Yeah, you've tempted me to actually go to Google Scholar on the laptop, and it's interesting what I'm seeing. Now, first ask Professor Sempewa to respond, but after you've responded to that, there's a question for you. Someone has sent me privately saying, you have been at the university for quite a bit and followed the different vice chancellors or the different reigns at the university. How would you rate academic freedom? Like how has it been over those different reigns? So, but you start with the other question that was asked. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the Universities and Other Tertiary Institutions Act is a factor in the composition of council. In its present form, it allows a person to be a member of council for a term of 4 years, and it could be renewed once. But the practice we have seen is that after people have been in a particular constituents as representatives to council for 8 years, they now shift and move to another constituency. And the law does not refuse it. But to the extent that that creates overstay on council, the Rwendere committee felt, after doing extensive consultations and comparisons with benchmarking with other institutions, that one is not the best. We can do better, but the law has yet to be revised, amended to enable that. So I would say yes, there is an issue there. If we agree that members of council shouldn't be there for too long, and which is actually steeped in expert opinion, because council members and council generally are supposed to hold the management in critique, but when the council stays for so long, they can very easily get entangled into management issues. In any case, those who have stayed much longer they may have old ways of doing things and they get too comfortable with them, but they are the old boys and girls on the committee, and therefore they resist the ideas of the few who come in and are new. So that would be it from the Rwendere report, but the law has yet to be amended. That is the link. Academic freedom, I would have to think seriously about it. Where is the evidence? I see a lot of things. I see people who are not very comfortable with hearing dissenting views, but I have not had the opportunity to compare it scientifically across the various vice chancellors. So I would leave it at that.
Okay. Arafa, and then Agatha will take over from there.
Yes, Toko. From my end, I would like to. I don't know whether I might divert from the side of academics, but just to find out, uh, can we, in regards to the financial bit, there are some times where you see Makerere being given maybe gifts, kind of maybe during when they were marking the 27 the 100 years, Makerere was given money. How was that money? Because all the money that Makerere is using is coming from the budget. So how was that money then moved to maybe the consolidated fund and everything? And then lastly, it's regards to the real estate. Makerere has a lot of real estate in Makerere, in Kololo, and in parts of Wandega, but all this real estate is not really developed. And some what you hear in the corridors is that the reason why it's non-developed, there are people who want maybe kickbacks for it to be developed from the investors. So how is that all being factored in? Thank you.
Agatha, are you there?
I am. I am. I
Oh,
think. I think the speaker went off. I thought I was the one who had lost the
no, he
connection.
actually finished. There was some awkward
Oh, you
silence.
did? Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am not sure I am competent to take over because most of the time I was driving and I didn't have battery at first. But I have a question that I wanted to ask both the speakers to maybe help us understand. So we're talking about academic freedom. I think it's what has come out the most in this exhibition. Letters of suspension, letters of interdiction, warning letters about meetings, and and I remember any form of assembly by students or staff have also attracted such letters. I'd like both Dr. Stella and Jude to help explain to the public the implications of that. Why should we be worried or scared that an institution like Makerere is cracking down on dissent, on assembly, and the opinions of both the staff of the university and its students? Yeah, so that people here understand if it is a bad thing and how bad it is. I think let's start with Stella and then Jude.
Right. I mean, there's the question that Arafa asked, and it didn't get answered. What are we doing with that?
Oh yeah, so you can start with Arafas and then mine. That's okay.
Arafa asked about gifts, and I think that I will refer that one to Jude. Maybe he knows. I wasn't at the marking, I don't know, 100 years of Makerere that he referred to. But I want to talk a little bit about about estate, but also about procurement. I mean, the question around funds and litigation, and the money going more to litigation than doing research was not referred to me by Godwin, But I want to speak specifically referring to what happened at MISA, at Makerere Institute of Social Research, when I was there. One of the issues upon which I did whistleblowing was how Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, when he was appointed director of MISA, there was a lot of property, both within the university, but also, I think, in Kololo and so away from the main Makerere Hill. And he got, instead of going through the procurement, it's called PPD, or is it public procurement and disposal systems, which are in place, and we have a very good act. Part of the corruption at Makerere University that we haven't even begun to touch is how the tenders are given, how the procurement is done, how the disposal is done, how those cars and vans are sold. And so in terms of property, Mamdani gets he deviates away from the established public institutions processes of procuring who's supposed to renovate the buildings. There used to be a renovations department, an estates department at the university, and he brings in these Indian boys with their Indian farms, and they have these high quotations that no one has looked through or verified or assessed, or he doesn't bring counter quotations. And he gives these Indian boys the contracts. They bring tiles, they bring air conditioning, they work on the library, they work on the walls, they work on the ceilings, they work on student accommodation. We have, he's constructing. So I was sitting on the financial committee of Makerere Institute of Social Research at the time, and decisions are made to give these tenders via phone call. We don't have committee meetings, financial committee meetings. We don't have the oversight of the college level, because MISA was a small unit within a college, which was then within the university. And when we whistle blew about the levels of corruption happening within the procurement and disposal systems, because when he came, we had a number of Ford cars bought with USAID money, because we were doing a lot of research that was funded by USAID. Those cars were disposed of in ways that deviated from the PPDA, so the Public Procurement and Disposal Act system. But I specifically want to talk about Mamdani then giving Makerere property, prime property, to his wife, who was running Maisha, which was a filming institute. No tenders, no applications, no nothing. When we made noise, when I made noise, I became the problem. And I think that part of the problem around corruption and money and finances is also very much systemic. Those people who are imbued with power. I don't think the question you asked is totally irrelevant. If that was happening in 2016, 2017, 2014, when I was at Makerere, what's happening today, right? And I think after I had whistleblown and nobody took me serious, and I was the mad woman, in 2019, a report, and I can share letters again because I have those on my Facebook timeline. A report was released by Makerere University, and they were questioning Mamdani about financial mismanagement and corruption at MISA. But it had been ongoing for a long time. And when they began questioning him, it was towards the end of his extended post-retirement contract. So now I will turn to the question that was from Agatha about, or maybe the very last one, was a small point that I wanted to make around the litigation question and the costs. I was awarded 120 million shillings in the case that I won in the High Court against Makerere University. Up to today, I've never been paid my money. That money is not given to those of us who win those court cases at Makerere. I don't know what happens to that money. Yes, there's corruption. Yes, there's the public media report around much more money is spent on litigation than on actual research? I don't think so. And the very last point around research is that for those of us who have labor disputes and also have research grants, because one of the criteria for promotion for a research track academic at Makerere University is bringing in research grants. Just a small point is that I had I won a number of scholarships and grants which were coming to the main Makerere University College of Humanities and Social Sciences account. Now, when I had my labor problems, my research grant from Carnegie Foundation was frozen. When the irregularity around my transfer from Makerere Institute of Social Research, MISA, to HURIPEC, Human Rights and Peace Center, when that irregularity happened, just to show how foolish and foolhardy these transfers that come from abuse of office, how hard it is to implement them, when the dean of the School of Law was told that my grant would be transferred from CHUS, in fact, the grant was transferred from CHUS to School of Law, because the supposition was because Janet Kataha had said, transfer Nyanzi from Mamdani and take her to Joe Oloka Onyango so we can quieten down the situation. The dean of the School of Law, that time Damali, Professor Damali, someone said, but Stella, this money came to the School of Law account. It's your research grant. What are we supposed to do with it? So my research grant sat frozen for years, being tossed between CHUS and School of Law. Eventually, they claimed that the money was taken back, sent back to Carnegie. I don't know how many other people who have access to research grants have got these mishaps happening. So in terms of corruption, I think we haven't even begun to go beyond the surface level of the levels of corruption at Makerere University. So to the question around academic freedom, I think, Agatha, that you touch on a really important question. I want to say, first of all, that generally in all of Africa, but also the whole world, we are seeing a closure of freedom. We are seeing increasing conservatism, and we are seeing growing preference of hard science, technology, engineering, and mathematics against the social sciences, humanities, and arts, right? And so in terms of disciplinary freedom, those of us in the arts in Uganda have been called useless, undervalued in terms of the promotion and the rewards and the payments. Already in Makerere, it's embarrassingly obvious the difference between a professor of medicine and a professor of history, the differences in salaries, though they may have the same qualifications and expertise and training and productivity, the disparity is already there. So in terms of what's valued much more, that too is a question. But I think that for those of us in the social sciences and the humanities, those of us with training to comment on the politics, the social, cultural, economics events of the day, starting with what's happening in the country. The closure of space is terrible. It's terrible at Makerere University. In terms of science, what happens is how we are assessed in terms of freedom is one innovates around a topic, and then if the science is good, I'm not talking about rubbish science. So you do you do your research around what are the debates, what is the literature, what's the scholarship, what is your question. If your science is good, what are your methods going to be? What's your sampling going to be? What are your outputs? If your science is good, then there's a check for ethics. What are the ethical implications of your work? As far as I'm concerned, those should be the only grounds for checking freedom. If your science is not well done, then there's no freedom to do rubbish science or bad science. If your scholarship is not good enough, the academy allows us to cross-check, counter, improve, or not allow. If the ethics, the ethical implications of a study are problematic, again, one can question the ethical merits of doing the work. Now, what's happening in Uganda is there isn't freedom. The shrinking down of space is around politicized political commentary, particularly. But there's also conservative right-wing controls. When I was at Makerere, one of the things I will credit Professor Mamdani for is he always covered my academic freedom to study homosexuality, a taboo topic, right? He allowed me to design research proposals to question the anti-homosexuality bill in 2011 that was still being debated in our parliament. He protected me. Mamdani protected me. I got grants, and with his backing, I was able to do my science because he knew that my science was the rigor of my science, my methodology, he would vouch for. Now, part of the problem then is the stereotypes around the topic. But that's, for me as a feminist, a topic that may not interest many. There are cultural controls around what one can study and what cannot. But in terms of the political questions of the day, which the academic intelligentsia in the country must lead. We must lead discussing politics, society, economics, corruption, transition, law, the military judicial decisions, all of these things that are happening in our country. Nepotism, there's a whole sociological theories around nepotism, freedoms, whatever. There is shutting down of voice and shutting down of brains and shutting down of debate. And I think at Makerere, even much more than other universities in Uganda, the administration of Nawangwe, when Nawangwe was vice chancellor in charge of admin, I think, he's a practical man. He has no business becoming vice chancellor and shutting down critique and critical thought around the everyday bread and life work of the social sciences and humanities, because we study meaning, we study power, we study those really contested questions in our country. And I think part of the negative effects of the shutting down and shrinking of academic freedom at Makerere University is then we see a lack of theorization, a lack of historicization, a lack of cutting edge debate around the topics of the day. That is why we are having a crisis. That is why we are paralyzed. That is why we are sick. We are sick because those who have the knowledge and training and expertise to think deeply and debate deeply about the issues of the day are not allowed to engage, particularly if they're critical. I have gone round and round speaking, which is terrible. But the point that has to be made for me is that in dictatorships such as Uganda, we need a corpus of resolute, resistant thinkers who will not be compromised, who can dare to raise their brains away from the sort of slavery and shutting down that the dictatorship is enforcing at Makerere University, but also the other universities. We need to redeem academic scholars in the social sciences and humanities from the decay, the emasculation, the taking away of voice. Our brains we didn't go to school to do nothing, So in terms of academic freedom, the space has been closed, particularly for those of us in the social sciences and humanities who want to criticize the failures of the day. Thank you, Agatha.
Thank you, Dr. Stella. Thank you very much for that elaborate. Jude?
Agatha, thank you very much for your question. I will answer it the way you asked it, but first, I would like to clarify that I did not hear Arafa's question. I think there was a connection issue on my side at that time. Maybe he will be kind and ask again. As he prepares to do that, one of the listeners I have seen is a little disturbed that I sound too cautious to give my opinion. But I would like to clarify that as a professor, my primary commitment is not to really speak and impress or speak fast, but to speak with the evidence that is available to me. Evidence is very key. I am not cautious, but I speak according to the evidence that is available to me. Now back to your question, Agatha. Why it should worry us that there seem to be sanctions for enjoying academic freedom? Yes, it should. It ought to worry us because university is a special place and a special stage for the students. It is a space for imagination, creativity. It is a space for exploration. It is a space for critique, including by the academic staff. It is a space for interrogating topics, including those on which we have been stereotyped to think in certain ways. And crucially, when there appear to be sanctions, even when they may be eventually lifted, they tend to have a deep-seated ripple effect to the extent that even when censorship appears to be lifted, a part of it called self-censorship is not normally lifted in tandem. So if at all, it should indeed be worrisome because such sanction could hold people back, and yet this Makerere universities, higher education generally, is the stage and place where people are encouraged and supported to think even in ways that may have been thought to be sinful, wrong. A university at best is a place for contestation all the time. And indeed, it should be the safest space. Some called it ivory tower. The lawyers take it a notch higher when they talk about land friends. But we have all these discourse communities where they challenge ideas. And it is important because that is how humanity makes progress. It is actually a space where it should be okay for people to make mistakes so they can be corrected, because university for many people is the transition period between childhood and adulthood. For example, we had a certain culture of guild, student guild politics, and many of the products of that politics would go on to become leaders that have some experience in national politics, regional politics, even beyond the East African region. So if this space is shrinking, if people are receiving sanctions or perceived to be receiving them, it has a ripple effect which is counterproductive to the progress that humanity seeks to make all the time, starting with the universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jude. I don't know if the person you asked to repeat the question is still on. I don't see Arafat. But there's a question that someone sent to my inbox for you as well,
Okay.
asking if you guys being public servants, if you're bound by collective responsibility. By you guys, I mean the staff of Makerere University and other public universities.
I must have missed something in your question,
So
Agatha.
I was asking, are you as members of public service bound by the principle of collective responsibility? For example, in criticizing government, and for some people, you'd look as you're part of government.
We are part of. We are part of.
Yes.
Can I proceed?
Yes, please.
Yes, we have collective responsibility, no doubt about that. But we are not part of collective irresponsibility. That has to be very clear. And we enjoy academic freedom, which means the ability to pursue knowledge and to disseminate knowledge without threat of penalty. So we have that, and we have ethics, we have associations to which we belong, they have methods of work, They have codes of conduct. So there is really no problem there. We come in with our expertise, we enjoy autonomy, and we build the same, we contribute to the same humanity, our common humanity, our common university, our common government, our common country. So the answer is yes, we are part of collective responsibility. I bold with underlined emphasis there. We are not part of collective irresponsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know if we have any uh, any more people that want to ask questions, Henry or Patrick. But as we do that, I will ask one last question also for both of you. Um, in our investigations for the exhibition, we I found out an anomaly. What would be an anomaly in under normal circumstances? For example, the fact that council institutes a search committee and members of council participate in competitions for head of colleges, for example. I don't know if you understand. I might not um, understand these things very well, but where some of the members here at the university are members of council, which council institutes from within itself a such committee, but the same members of council come and vie for those positions. Did I get that right, Professor Jude? Um, am I hurt or did I go off? I don't seem to see anyone speaking. Oh, so it seems Professor Jude is the one that can't hear me or went off. But so I think for Stella, I'll ask a different question until Professor Jude clarifies for me if I got that right. I don't know if when you were at the university, Dr. Stella, something like that was
I
happening.
had muted myself. You
Oh,
got it
okay. So you
right.
had the okay.
You got it right. There are members of council who could participate in the search committees of council, and then they could stand for similar positions. What doesn't happen is that a member of the search committee is also a candidate.
But a candidate would have participated in the selection of the members of a search committee.
No, he or she doesn't. Those who have an intention to stand will have to declare a conflict of interest and be excused when the search committee is being formed.
Okay, okay. I was wondering how that would go. So maybe another question would be very personal, and it is okay if you do not want to answer it, and maybe Dr. Sarah would be freer.
Please ask.
Of yeah. So I have two questions pertaining, both of them pertaining members of council. So you already mentioned the position of the law of the charter that talks about how long a member of council should serve for. Um, a term of 4 years, renewable once, which would make it a maximum of 8 years. Now, we have people that have served for much longer than that, and I saw my team at Agora had interpreted that as a lacuna in the law where people are not prohibited from moving from one constituency to another. But my interpretation would have been that if the law says a member should serve on council for a maximum of 8 years, should it matter which constituency you are serving? Shouldn't it be that if you are Professor Jude Sempeba and you've served on council as a representative of Senate or Mwasa, you have served your 8 years maximum? Is there a lacuna in the law from where you stand, or are people just with impunity disregarding the law? And Dr. Stella, you can also weigh in on that. Professor Jude, you are muted in case you're speaking.
Yes, Agatha, I heard your question. It is good that maybe not the rest of the participants in this discourse, you are a lawyer. There's a lacuna in the law because the law did not talk about people serving 8 years. It talked about being in a term of 4 years, renewable once. Then a person does that, and then they come back as the representatives of an entirely different constituency. If the issue is not the law, then maybe it ought to be subjected to interpretation by a competent court. Otherwise, that is the practice as it is now. And given the letters of the law, you may not say for sure that this is a question of impunity. After all, if somebody has been representing, let's say, the academic staff, and now they come as the representatives of Senate, they are the representatives of Senate. That is, and you know what the law does not prohibit, it allows. Thank you.
I hear you. Thank you very much. Do you want to say something about it, Dr. Stella?
I mean, not really. So when I was at Makerere, Agatha, do you want to mute yourself a little bit? Or maybe it's Jude. Oh, good. Yeah. When I was at Makerere, I was really a nerd, interested in science, interested in my craft. I was not interested in governance. I thought for me that I would focus on my academic scholarship. And then later on, when I became an adult, when I grew up, I would then get interested in questions around governance, Senate, council, and all of that. And so I don't really know. It sounds problematic to me. But then I wanted to respond very quickly to the question around so a counterpoint to what Jude said about I think you asked about, since we're public servants, are we duty bound around questions of collective responsibility? Now, I want to speak from my experience and say that part of the intimidation of scholars, and it's real intimidation, is by people who are not schooled in the Employment Act, who are not schooled in what it means to be a public servant, and are not schooled around, the autonomy between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Public Service, but also who are not schooled in what Jude ably explained around our academic freedom and autonomy. People would say to me, how can you keep criticizing the failure of the president to provide menstrual hygiene products to young girls, yet you are working in the ministry, you're working under the Ministry of Education? How can you criticize Janet Museveni, who is the Minister of Education, yet Makerere University? In fact, I have a disciplinary hearing in which that was the main factor around, you're under the Ministry of Education. Why do you do this menstrual activism that is shaming the university and shaming the first lady and shaming and shaming? And I think that for those of us who don't have legal, which is the majority of staff at Makerere University, we don't have legal counsel, we don't have the ability to interpret the laws. That is one of the pressure points. That is one of the points around which tongues are cut out. That is, so people want to comply and be obedient and be non-combative and live with failed governance structures and live with governance deficits because of the fear that the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Education is headed by Janet Museveni, who then might have pressure put on one's contract. And I think that part of why I was able to challenge one of the ways in which we were able to make inroads in my own dispute in the High Court was when my lawyers sat me down and explained that, Stella, the Minister of Education has nothing on you and what you do as an academic or what you do as a critique or whatever. Part of the failure is how the persona of Janet Museveni and everything around her, the military might, the economic might, the position and status, and they're the gateways into all sorts of good things. Sweetness and honey come from the stamp of the Musevenis. That conflation between the person of Mama Janeti, the person of Muchala Museveni, the person of Mama Muhozi, the person of the wife of the person with the guns and their military might, and they control the prisons, they control the courts. The conflation of the first lady with the Minister of Education, and then the conflation between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Public Service is severe and deep for those of us in the academy. And so this question around you are a public servant, what about collective responsibility, reinforces that stereotype, reinforces that, I don't know what the word is, there's misconceptions that need to be debunked for academics in Uganda about claiming and reclaiming our autonomy and our freedom to do things like this collective responsibility or whatever. And I think for me, as a member of the opposition, I think what I appreciate about Professor Sempe, well, now I can call you Professor, is what another commentator said and was criticizing him about being slow and measured and calm, and he works very methodically and calls for science, and he's not heated, because the flavor of the academy is that with that sort of calmness and objectivity, that is how we are supposed to debunk and divorce ourselves of those lies that are told to academics to silence them. And so I think the diversity of who we are as academics in Uganda, as intelligentsia from Uganda, should allow us to bring a different attributes to bear on questions around collective responsibility, questions around redeeming, liberating, freeing Uganda. And for me, that question that conflicts, you're a public servant. How can you question? You're a public servant. How can you do that? Needs to be debunked, and its power has to be castrated, because it is really freezing and paralyzing a lot of the possibilities that would come from the university. On the questions of council, those questions are for generals, and I think that the Major General Professor Jude Sempewa has dealt with that very well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stella. I see Apalo. I don't know how to say this name. Please, you are in a noisy place, but you can go ahead and speak.
Thanks so much, Stella, Jude, and Agatha for convening this important session. I joined a little bit late, and I'm wondering if this has already been discussed, and if it has been discussed, apologies, and you may pass it. I'm just wondering that in most of the letters that I see, either suspension, interdiction, dismissal letters, they are usually signed by the VC, and there is no minute of a disciplinary committee or a body at the university that sat and came up with a resolution either to effect that punishment for the particular staff. To Jude at the university, I'm wondering, do we have this body that's responsible for hearing cases or disciplinary cases or whatever happens to the staff or the university students? And how often do they meet? And the affected people given a chance to represent themselves, to defend themselves? And is time sufficient? Normally, is sufficient time given to them to be able to come up with the required maybe defense in a way? Because I've seen, I think, in a letter suspending you, you are given 2 days to respond, and before the letter reached you, you had already been interdicted. And I tried to see if there was a disciplinary body that sat and resolved to interdict you and do all that. So I'm wondering what is exactly happening at the Ivory Tower. If it has been asked, please, I'm sorry. Yes. Over to you, Agatha.
Uh, Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't unmute my microphone. Professor Jut, would you like to respond to? Yeah, why, Melvin? Why are you laughing? The network was just not allowing me unmute. So, Professor Jut, I think the question from Apollo, yeah, that name was for you. Jut, can you hear me? You unmuted. Yes, Dr. Stella, please go
Right.
ahead.
So I know that
Yes.
Apollo Koda did not direct the question at me, but then from my experience, because I I was subjected to so many disciplinary hearings. But one of the things that happened when we were talking earlier, I think both myself and Professor Sempe were questioned how come it is that. So in my case, I say that sometimes disciplinary decisions were made between a phone call between one person and another person. Sometimes disciplinary decisions were taken not by a disciplinary committee constituted by the university, but between others sitting, these people who sit in state house and other high places, people who sit at the police station and other high places, telling Bruce Kabasa, who was heading the appointments board during my time, to take particular actions and then enforce them through the human resources department. So in my case, Apollo Koda, I experienced 3 different types of disciplinary levels at Makerere University. There is that one which you assume exists, where upon any disciplinary matter happening, and I think it's the one where Professor Sempeba was saying, how come in his case, without going through the specified, stipulated mechanisms of redress, that he got a warning letter, then he got an interdiction letter. So the normal process in my case, when I undressed at Makerere University, which was interpreted as total indiscipline, right? Instead of looking at it as resistance, resistance work, which feminists are supposed to do at universities. I was practicing my trade. It was looked at as a disciplinary issue, and a disciplinary committee, an ad hoc disciplinary committee was summoned. Now, that first ad hoc disciplinary committee, um, as the person who was being presented, I had to comment on its suitability, and I immediately said no, because it mainly comprised of old men, many of whom were in the old boys league at Makerere University, and some of whom I had already approached and these are men who would say things to me like Stella, we see your point, you have a case, this is injustice, but Mamdani is older than you. Mamdani has brought so much money to the university. What are you bringing to the university? Stella, be humble, sit down and wait for your turn, you know. And these men were then supposed to sit and listen to a disciplinary matter involving me after they had belittled my issue, which they all always agreed, oh my God, this is a terrible breach of contract. This is a terrible breach of the Employment Act, etc., etc. So there's that level where an ad hoc committee is convened. The second ad hoc committee that was convened, Professor Mamdani challenged and said that part of the committee members, including people such as Professor Bachibinga, who was at the School of Law, had commented positively. And in my defense, on the Makerere University mailing, I think there's a general mail thing where we used to have conversations. I forgot about the name, mailing list stuff or something like that, where internal conversations around my labor disputes had pro Nyazi and pro Mamdani camps. And so Mamdani challenged some of the composition. And I think for me, this is healthy. This is what should happen. And then eventually, we had an ad hoc committee that comprised, and then in my case, I said because it was a promotion case, I was not going to have people without a PhD sitting in judgment of me, people who didn't understand research sitting in judgment of, I had to specify the criteria. And I think part of what I'm trying to say is that even when there are disciplinary measures, that even those of us who are being brought to book and being questioned, which is a healthy part of managing conflict in any institution, we must be allowed, as we are allowed to go through the process, we must be allowed to give input. And my input was also looked at as another disciplinary issue. Sometimes I was told I was psychotic. She's mentally sick. How can she challenge the powers that be, right? Anyway, the third, so that's the first level. Ad hoc disciplinary committees are convened. But there's the appeals, the Makerere University Academic Staff Tribunal, where disciplinary issues are taken. And the Makerere, so during my time, I think it was one of the most rigorous, grueling processes. It took me so much courage to go and face them, and it was always in the public media glare. I thought it was not to my advantage, but having gone through the process, at the end of the day, my issues were as clear as day. that Mamdani and Miza and Human Resources and Makerere were breaching many layers of my contract. And so a second level is that tribunal, the tribunal during my time, which was 10 years ago, 10 years in 2026, so what next year, was fair and just. It was very, very hard for those of us who had to stand before it, but I got not one, not two, but three judgments in my favor, even when everybody at Makerere University thought I was mentally sick. How could she undress? But the issues that caused me to undress were issues that anyone who knows labor law, anyone who has a bit of understanding of how institutions must run, anyone who understands human resources, anyone who knows a contract would blatantly say, but guys. So that's the second level. And I think that the third level is the one that involved the public service, the public services, and the woman who is currently the Kampala Authority director, Hajati, was she summoned a disciplinary level in terms of managing my contract that was bound under the Employment Act as a public servant. And for me, that level of hearing was one of the most abused layers: abuse of office, abuse of power, intimidation not just of myself but of my relatives, of the vice chancellor, who was, like I said, he's my cousin, of anybody who was seen to be in my favor. Their own contracts were thrown in their faces, even when they were professors. And just to end, therefore, I want to say that there are mechanisms. The three that I have talked about, I think, are provided for within, I've forgotten what books we went through, but all of them had my input because I had advisors within human resource as a discipline, but also from the law, and also people who just believed in me. I think the question Apollo Kodo asked is an important question for people who want to take on the question of autonomy and independence and challenge and building resistance within the university. What are the possible channels of redress? Because it's not just one. I've spelled out three. My own issue was a very junior issue. And of course, the last one, when the university structures fail. I mean, there's also an appeals process I went through the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. It was a joke, a total joke, because that is where women who had a bachelor's degree were sitting and telling me about how bad I was. So they lacked the competence to judge a PhD woman and her issues. I just say to them, don't even start. And then the very last, so the fifth layer for me was going to the High Court and opening a civil suit against Makerere University. That too is a disciplinary measure, which, in spite of Makerere University having the side of the Ministry of Education, having the side of the military, having the side of the judiciary, I won in broad daylight for all Ugandans to see. And I think the sixth layer of disciplinary intervention is protest and resistance, which I did. My undressing at Makerere University was bringing discipline and order to the university so that it would discipline itself. And eventually at MISA, we are getting there. It's not yet Uhuru at MISA, 10 years after my own disciplinary issues, but I think that it was the beginning of a very interesting, robust process that unfortunately is now being silenced once again, seeing what's happening to the likes of Professor Sempewa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stella. And at this point, I'll ask if Professor Sempewa would like to say something as we conclude.
My connection was problematic at some stage. I don't know if a question was asked that you would like me to respond to.
Yes, there's a question asked by someone. I don't. His name was very complicated. It's the one that you found Dr. Stella answering about disciplinary measures, mechanisms.
Okay.
I don't know. Did you hear it?
No.
So he was actually referring to your own circumstances where you were first given a warning and then within a short time you got a letter of interdiction. So he was asking about disciplinary mechanisms, but also the right to a fair hearing, and if you guys are given a chance to defend yourselves in circumstances like those. Jude, you are muted just in case you're saying something.
Yes, I am. Thank you for the question. I would say that the answer is yes and no. I am happy to confirm that the disciplinary procedure is established in our policies and it is clear. I would also like to confirm that many times people have gone through that procedure where they are cautioned verbally, then they are invited, then they are talked to again, then they receive caution, and then they sit through all these committees at the departmental, school, college levels before things escalate to the appointments board disciplinary committee. But we also know cases, as in the instant case, where people have been thrown under the bus without any due process. My hypothesis is that these are the individual transgressions by erratic officers, And the university has a system through which even those can be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jude. Concluding remarks so that we end this segment here.
I'd like to thank you very much, Agatha, and the entire team at Agora for affording me the opportunity to participate in this discourse. I enjoyed it. I hope others enjoyed it as much as I did, but especially for putting our institution in the spotlight, shining a light on various things, even the not very comfortable. This is how we make progress. As we saw in the initial reply on the X page of the university, things would not improve if everybody remained silent. So I thank you and your team. You're doing us a very good service, providing this platform and indeed opportunity for these issues to be discussed on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Unfortunately, while the official page of the university says it welcomes these concerns and the issues that are being raised, some individuals who actually speak for the university by if you go by the principle of agency, like a guy that I've been told is the PA of Professor Nawangwe called Gordon Mranjera, and I think he's on this space. I have seen some of his comments under it. They continue disparaging everyone that is participating in the space and Agora. So I don't know which one we should take, whether they are the university is genuine in saying one thing and its agents are saying another. I saw this where he had a question for you, but I deliberately didn't ask it because we asked both the university spokesperson and uh, and the secretary and actually the PA of Professor Nawangwe if they wanted to participate, and they didn't. So I thought that they had no right to ask questions since they didn't want to be part of it.
Can I say something brief, very brief, Agatha?
Yes, please.
The Makerere is a centenarian university. You cannot be unfair to it. It is its statement that holds. If you may allow, you cannot now depend on the agents of a school dropout. In Uganda, we say ebitaina makulu tobiwa makulu. Murangira is just someone who dropped out of the doctoral program. So you really don't have to waste any of your time on that one. Kumbaga tekubulako musiwufu, so just ignore his blabbering. It is okay. The statement that the university made through its official channel, the X page, which is verified, recognizes that you're doing a good job, you are providing feedback, giving people an opportunity. Yeah, that is the one. It cannot be in any way matched by the ramblings of some attention-seeking, low-level people. So,
Thank you.
kumbaga
I'm
tekubula
going to.
musiwufu.
Thank you, Professor. So I'm going to ask. Like I said, their agents are on this space. I see Matthias Semanda is here as well. That you convey to them on our behalf to the leadership of the university that we have questions that would have liked to hear answers for, because the statement did not exhaust all the questions that we are getting about issues like conflict of interest, denying people a fair hearing, this dictatorship and high-handedness of everyone that has said what we don't like. We have to either dismiss or threaten or interdict or transfer them to, some places in the villages. We know issues like dismissal of Dean's Forum, issues like blocking a meeting of staff associations, and we would like to ask questions like that, issues of questionable academic qualifications, and not just for the Vice Chancellor, but others that have been promoted in the recent years. I think one of them was blocked from becoming a deputy vice chancellor because of something like that. So please, if you could tell them that the public still has more questions. The exhibition is still ongoing. We still have a lot of information we need to share, but also people are getting bolder regardless of the intimidation and the gagging that we've been told about. So we will continue with it and probably have another segment of the space, especially if we get the university leadership to be part and answer some of these questions, but also touch on some aspects that we didn't touch on: promotions, post retirement contracts, and the criteria that is used, and things like that. I wanted to end here, but I realized I have not given you, Dr. Stella, a chance to say your concluding remarks.
Just very quickly, one, to celebrate Professor Jude Sempewa, because anyone who was doubting his ability to, come out strong, as he ended, he climaxed like, eh! Kumbaga tekubula kwa msiewo for Gordon Murangira. He's a school dropout. He's unwashed, uncircumcised, Philistine. You will come down. Gordon, you will come down and your ilk. Okay? So I have sort of put an appendage to what Professor Sempewa has said. I want to celebrate Professor Sempewa and others such as himself who are speaking out, because it is not easy to expose the machinery. Makerere University represents the state, a dictatorship, whether people want to admit it or not. Another hypothesis I've thrown out there. And I think that therefore, when there are bold intellectuals who are using their brains and their experiences to speak loudly, especially about places where you produce knowledge and you have students and you have a whole record of performance, whether good or bad, we must celebrate these great men. I want to thank you, Agora, for creating this space, because these spaces are important. But over and above the space, your ability to solicit engagement and contributions from all manner of people who want to speak. I want to say that that is important work, especially for those institutions that have been captured and taken over by the dictatorship of Yoweri Museveni. And finally, I think that one of the ending remark statements that Professor Sempewa said was that Makerere is over a centenary. And, Makerere has survived harder times than what we have. Makerere Makerere will outlive all of us. Nawangwe, Nawangwe, if Gordon is unwashed and uncircumcised, and a Philistine who will come down, a Goliath that will come down, so is Nawangwe, so is any other cadre, so is, I can mention a whole host of names, because Makerere belongs to all of us. It's not the ambit of just Museveni worshippers and Museveni sycophants and Museveni praise singers. No, Makerere is for Ugandans. We build for the future, the great Makerere, and we must not tire from putting our university, Ugandans' university, the world's university, to the task of standing up and not being a mere, in the words of Yusuf Serunkuma, an overglorified secondary school. Because those of us who believe in the work and the potential of that university will continue and must continue. And I appeal, if you don't want to continue, please continue working for the freedom and the liberation of Makerere University, the administration, the management, the faculty, the academic, and maybe not just Makerere, but all the other universities that fall under the unbelievable leadership, misgovernance of Janet Kataha Museveni. For God and my country, I thank you very much. Agora, you keep doing your work. And
Thank you.
they should be brought. Create a space where it's them. We have spoken. Let them come and speak. Let them come and. What we do in the
Well,
university is let them come and speak. And, if they want to, if they don't, we shall continue speaking.
well, we can't force them, but we did reach out to about 4 people in the university, and all of them didn't come through. Thank you very much, Stella. We take the flowers as Agora. Thank you, Jude, for being part of the space. Thank you, everyone, the audience that is always here with us. And as I said, we will have another edition about this issue next week. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jesaawa yonna ekiwandiiko kibakuddira ekisobola okuyita nga Museveni tasobola yadde n'ogende Kenya. Ate kirungi nnyo kubanga bavunziza Uganda mubalaba abafiira bweru, baba tafiiridde Italy afiira Turkey, baba tafiiridde Turkey afiira UK, baba tafiiridde UK afiira America. Kati twagala tubasibeko nati nga talina wayinza kuyita. Twagala Museveni bw'alwala si azeeyuse si abunze, twagala agende mu malwaliro ga wano. Kivuddeko Museveni bwe twamutudde mu kkooti y'ensi yonna, Museveni firimu bwe twagiraze ensi yonna, bwe twatuukiridde abakulembeze b'ensi yonna, abo bamuwala ssente, abo bamuyamba nga n'ennyonyi zaagezaako okutiisatiisa abantu bwe bajjako swiki eri wano tesobola kusituka. So bwe twamutudde mu kkooti y'ensi yonna, y'ensonga lwaki mulaba tulina kalemberembe akatono, y'ensonga lwaki tusobola okutambula mu bantu baffe, y'ensonga lwaki mulaba tusobola okwogera nammwe, y'ensonga lwaki nawulidde nga bagezaako okuyiiya tulinga bajja batukuba bukubi tebannyonnyola naye kati bakyabukuta bayiiya ekiboozibozi bagamba nti ate waliwo zibbomu bwe bazitega bwe bazitegulula bwe bazitega bwe bazitegulula ebifo bye bategamu bye bakyali baabwe bwe bazijjamu mutabani wa Museveni bwe yali atambulanga saalaba ku zibbomu ne Museveni bw'atambulanga bwe tetulaba zibbomu. Guma musajja mukulu kati gakubugumye guma njagala okubategeeza baganda bange toluvannyuma lw'ebbagamba bino nzize okubaleetera obubaka obw'enjawulo okubagamba nti essuubi lyonna lyonna wadde Museveni tugambye amawanga gonna gamusaleko obuyambi kuba sente babbanzi be nga bwe babeeza covid. Essuubi lirimu mmwe abantu, nze nsobola busobozi bakulembera n'ettiimu yange naye essuubi lirimu mmwe. Essuubi teriri mu makooti, essuubi teriri mu bano ba MP bakina meeya baani, essuubi lirimu mmwe. Bano jasi boogezi, bano ba MP bameeya bakansala omulimu gwabwe kubogerera amazima, kwogera bino ebituufu nga babyogera ku rediyo, nga babyogera ku TV, nga babyogera ne mu paliyamenti yaabwe. Kati yafuuka ekisassalala kubanga Museveni yagiteeka mu nsawo bw'ati. Ndi wano okubategeeza nti okugoba Museveni essuubi lirimu mmwe. Muzze mumulaba ti n'abakulembeze be mulonda abamu amanyi obbagula eitha ne basirika oba ne bakyukira ddala ne batandika kuwagira ebibikyamu. Ndi wano okubategeeza nti tewali muntu mulala agenda kukyusa bulamu bwammwe baganda bange okuggyako mmwe. Mmwe muyina okulembera, mubakulembere babagoberere. Yemmwe mwe tuyinamu essuubi, mwekolemu omulimu kubanga kino mukisobola. Njagala bategeeza tingabe muzze wano abangi obanga bwe muli wano amazima ga Katonda musukulu. Museveni tasobola tutta ffenna n'atumalawo, tasobola yadde okuttako bantu 100 oba 200. Olwedde yatta abasukka mu 100.